Margaret Hayes stood at her kitchen window, watching the Montana sunrise paint the mountains gold. At 72, she'd learned that life's cruelest lessons often arrived wrapped in love. Her son, Thomas, had always been charming. Too charming, perhaps. The kind of boy who could talk his way out of anything, who made promises as easily as breathing. She'd raised him alone after his father left, pouring everything into giving him opportunities she never had. The ranch had been in her family for 3 generations. $4 million worth of land, cattle, and memories. Margaret had planned to leave it all to Thomas when the time came. But time, she discovered, had different plans. It started small. Thomas visiting less frequently. Phone calls that felt hurried, distracted. His wife, Jennifer, making excuses. Margaret told herself they were busy with their own lives in Seattle, running Thomas's real estate business. Then came the day that changed everything. Margaret had driven into town for her weekly groceries. The bank manager, Dale Morrison, had pulled her aside with concern creasing his weathered face. "Margaret, I probably shouldn't say anything, but there's been some unusual activity with your property title. Someone requested documentation last month." Her stomach tightened. What kind of documentation? Appraisal records, market comparisons, the kind of thing someone pulls when they're preparing to sell. That evening, Margaret did something she'd never done before. She called her lawyer, Robert Chen, a man she'd known for 40 years. "Robert, I need you to do something for me." Quietly, what Robert discovered made her hands shake as she held the phone. Thomas had obtained power of attorney 2 years ago when she'd had a minor health scare. She'd signed the papers without reading them carefully, trusting her son completely. He'd been preparing to sell the ranch. Worse, he'd already accepted a preliminary offer from a development company. They planned to subdivide the land, build luxury vacation homes. Her family's legacy, carved up and sold to the highest bidder. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat in her late mother's rocking chair, watching shadows move across the ceiling, feeling something harden in her chest. Not quite anger, something colder, something more resolute. By morning, she knew what she had to do. She called Robert back. "How quickly can we reverse the power of attorney and complete a sale?" "If you're serious, 2 weeks, maybe 3. Serious. Find me a buyer, someone who'll preserve the land." Robert worked fast. He found the Riverside Land Conservancy, a nonprofit that protected working ranches. They offered $4 million, slightly below market value, but with the guarantee the land would never be developed. Margaret signed the papers on a Tuesday morning. That afternoon, she packed a single suitcase and called her childhood friend, Dorothy, in Arizona. "Dottie, remember how you always said I should visit? I'm thinking of staying a while." 3 days later, Thomas finally called. His voice was tight, barely controlled. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" Margaret kept her voice steady, even warm. "I sold the ranch, sweetheart." "You what?" "That was my inheritance. I had plans." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I believe I do, Thomas. I sold something that belonged to me. The something you were planning to sell behind my back." Silence, long and damning. "I was going to tell you," he finally said, his voice smaller now. "I was waiting for the right time. The right time to sell your mother's home? To destroy for generations of family history? When exactly would that have been?" "I need that money, Mom. The business is struggling. Jennifer and we're in debt. Serious debt." And there it was. The truth. Finally. Not malice, but desperation. Not betrayal, but weakness. Margaret felt her anger soften, just slightly. "You could have asked me for help, Thomas. We could have found another way. Would you have given me $4 million? No, but I would have helped you find a path forward that didn't require destroying everything I've built." She heard him breathing on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. "So that's it? You're just done with me?" Margaret closed her eyes. This was the moment she'd been dreading. The moment when love and justice collided. 2 weeks ago, a check arrived in the mail, she said quietly. $15,000. "You brought it by yourself, actually. You stood in my kitchen and told me to go live far away from here. You laughed, Thomas. You laughed at your own mother." She paused, letting him absorb this. What you didn't know was that 3 days before that, I'd already signed the papers selling the ranch. That check you gave me, it wasn't a generous gift. It was a dismissal. You were buying me out of my own life with money you planned to make from my property. Mom, I posited that check, Thomas. It's paying for my apartment in Arizona. It's a lovely place. Warm, quiet, full of people who actually want me around. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. I didn't steal from you, Margaret continued, her voice gentler now. I sold what was mine to protect it from being destroyed. The money went to the conservancy. I kept enough to live comfortably. I don't need millions, Thomas. I never did, so I get nothing. You get a choice. You can be angry and bitter about money you were never entitled to, or you can figure out how to fix your own problems without taking shortcuts through other people's lives. Another long pause. I loved you, Thomas said, and she could hear tears in his voice. I still love you. I know you do. And I love you. But love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you without consequences. Love means hoping they'll learn and grow from their mistakes. She hung up gently, setting the phone down with trembling hands. That was 6 months ago. Now, Margaret sat on her small patio in Scottsdale, sipping morning coffee with Dorothy. Her life was simpler now, smaller, but it was hers. Any word from Thomas? Dorothy asked, already knowing the answer. He sent a card last week. Said he and Jennifer are in counseling. They're selling their house, downsizing. He got a job teaching real estate courses at the community college. Will you forgive him? Margaret considered this. The morning sun was warm on her face. A hummingbird darted past, iridescent and free. I already have, she said finally. Forgiveness isn't about them, Dottie. It's about me, about not carrying that weight anymore. But will you see him again? Maybe, someday, when he's ready to meet me as the person I actually am, not the resource he needed me to be. She thought about the ranch sometimes. The conservancy sent her photos. The land looked the same, eternal and beautiful. A young family was leasing it, running cattle, teaching their children to ride. Her legacy wasn't money. It was the land itself, preserved. It was the lesson Thomas might still learn about integrity and consequences. It was the freedom she'd bought herself with that $15,000 check, not to live far away, because she'd been dismissed, but because she chose to. You know what's funny? Margaret said, smiling at her friend. He thought he was getting rid of me. Turns out, I was setting myself free. Dorothy laughed, and Margaret joined in. The sound carried across the desert morning, light as air, unburdened by what had been or what might have been. Just two old friends, laughing in the sunshine, having survived their children and their heartbreaks and their betrayals, still here, still choosing kindness, still choosing themselves. And that, Margaret had learned, was its own kind of victory.